And we're back for part 2 of the interview with Doug. All right, Doug, so Maryland, they changed their perspective on placing solar farms on farmland.
Sure.
They're now pushing for a non-farmland utility scale solar placement. That's how they want to do it going forward. And they had a committee kind of go over different options, and one of them was brownfields, which are fields that are contaminated, they can't plant crops in. Parking canopies, former landfills, which we have one, I think in Columbus, that just recently closed. We'll go down to South Korea. They use the medians and highways to do some of their solar, which I think is really cool because it makes it like a bike path underneath, so the bike path is protected and shaded. And I've even seen that some states are doing it over sidewalks, creating a shaded path for those people to walk down. Have these options been looked at locally or just in the state in general by your company?
We've made the decision to purely operate in the area that we call utility scale solar, typically 50 megawatts and above. But I know a lot of folks who work in those industries. The main reason that we're focused on solar the way we're doing it is it's about 1/3 the energy cost when we're creating that electricity to put it in a farm field setting versus on a rooftop, probably half the price of doing like a carport or walkway. But the first time that I saw solar at any significant scale, like you're saying, was on a highway median in Massachusetts. And places that are far more land constrained will get to those solutions faster once kind of the lowest cost options for generating electricity have been achieved. And I think you'll see a lot more of that in Ohio. But just like developing large-scale solar project, takes willingness of whoever owns or controls that property or right-of-way, whether it's a brownfield or otherwise. Is there a clear pathway to permit it? Is there a way to connect the electricity to actually be able to use it or sell it? And especially with brownfields, we have looked at that in Ohio, whether reclaimed mining sites or otherwise, and there are several great projects going on in those now. But the sites of those that have access to transmission and that are in an environmental state that we can even disturb the ground are sometimes few and far between. So there are a lot of challenges to it, but I can assure you that those options are being explored in the scale of, in terms of large brownfields, we're certainly looking at it. But in terms of those other options, there's solar at every scale that's being looked at.
So you're saying your company is focused on these larger projects, and for the industry, the most cost-effective approach is using fields.
Yeah, and the reason is, using those previously disturbed fields, what you can achieve is they're typically flat, and which means less civil work, less soil disturbance, but then we're limited in where we can put it based on where transmission is. You're only going to put these projects within a couple miles of a transmission line, and that line needs to also have capacity on it. So it's where the lines are and where the lines are that have capacity. So it's a natural limiting factor of how much room there is on the grid for where we can even put it. While there are a lot of projects proposed now, certainly not all of them are connecting to lines or trying to connect to lines that have the space or can be done economically. So while we found a good spot here on the transmission system, it's not infinite. So in a state like Maryland, there's a lot less farmland in Maryland than there is in Ohio. It's Eastern Shore, and then on the mainland things get hilly pretty quick. Whereas in Ohio, you have 12 or 13 million acres of farmland, and with this amount of solar we're talking about in the state now, about 20 gigawatts, that could occupy 140, 150,000 acres. So maybe 1% of that, if I'm doing my math right.
Right. Okay. Now, what happens to the solar? Let's say you're operational, everything's up and running. Where does that solar energy go?
Sure. It goes into what we refer to as the bulk transmission system for electricity, and really it does go where it's needed. So if you Just like if you turn on the faucet, the water coming from the reservoir or from your well is going to that faucet where you need it. In terms of the electricity from this project, it's going into AEP's 765 kilovolt Marysville to Sorensen line. So on the Marysville end, that's Union County. That does get stepped down in spots, so some of that energy is going to the local and regional electric grid, so used here in Logan or elsewhere, but it can also be carried on to Columbus or other spots that need it. It's not new. The grid that we're in here in Ohio does not stretch all the way to New York City. It does go to New Jersey, does go to Chicago and parts of Indiana, and as far south as Kentucky and North Carolina in spots. But as you know, just driving around, there's power plants in those places too. So it's likely that the load there is being served by power plants a lot closer.
Okay.
So the energy is likely to be used mostly in Ohio.
So the energy that's created, is there a bidding process? I don't know how you want to terminalize it, but is there?
Yeah. So we typically will find a long-term buyer for the power, at least a large percentage of it, that wants to buy power for 20 years from the project or so, or whatever length they would like. Otherwise, when in the grid here, your power price is determined either every minute or every 5 minutes based on a bidding process for how much demand there is versus how much supply there is.
Okay.
So solar, like any other resource, is bidding into that and being kind of the least cost resource. Solar tends to bid in at $0, and then the price that everyone takes for that 5 minutes is based on the highest cost resource required to meet the demand. So whether that's $30, it's all being met by solar and efficient gas, or if it's $120 a megawatt hour because you're pulling in expensive gas peaker plants to fill in those last few megawatt hours.
So I didn't realize that the cost of energy was that fluctuating that quickly.
Yeah,
So,
constantly.
I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Let's say this is operational. Just the fact, even though the solar energy that's being captured here is not necessarily going to stay here,
Mm-hmm.
would it not be an argument that the larger supply of power on the grid, is that not going to force energy prices to go down because there's a higher supply?
Yeah, it should, especially for energy that's bidding in at the lowest price. So as more solar is on the grid and zero marginal cost resources like solar, it should be driving down prices.
Okay. So it should drive down prices for everyone, regardless if they're actually using the solar.
Yeah, and just as an aside, like right now, Ohio is importing about 20% of its power from other states. So, and that that's a factor of coal plants shutting down and of load increasing in the state or demand for electricity. So if there's power coming in as far as like hydroelectric in Canada coming into Ohio. So, right now we're sending dollars, not only out of Logan County to buy power or out of the region, but even out of the state to buy electricity that you're using here.
I did not realize that. So the power grid is you're feeding into that. And
Yeah.
as you said, how far it can go to Jersey, South Carolina, North Carolina. I mean, it's a well-established long-range grid that we are a part of.
Yeah.
So this is going to add to that grid, which would force or allow our government to say not buy power from Canada.
Or just means that like when you think of it, when you're pouring the electricity in here, it's it's like resistance for the power that'd be coming from somewhere else. So that power would be like instead of flowing in from Virginia, it's not coming as far or something.
Right.
So it's just kind of rebalancing where the power is going. So you're putting more electricity in at this end, so it's keeping, it just rebalances where the electrons are going.
I appreciate the
Yeah.
analogy there. Now, what do you say to a local resident who's concerned about this project? Is there any specific concerns you would address to that person if he was right here in front of you right now?
We see such a wide variety of concerns, and the ones that we want to meet first with everyone are just like, it's just okay. Let's establish a baseline of what solar is and isn't, so we're talking the same language. Whether it's Like, is solar safe? Like, what's solar going to do to farmland? And it's just, if we're talking the same language about what solar is or isn't and what we're proposing on this project, it can answer a lot of questions that might currently be keeping folks up at night. Because whether the project is opposed or not, there's the state could approve it either way. So we want concerns to be answered, so it's not something you're worried about for the several years between now and construction. So much can be addressed by just the nature of what solar technology looks like and the specific things that we can do to mitigate concerns, whether it's setbacks or landscaping or anything. So we've heard a lot of it, but every concern needs to be addressed. I can't just hand you a pamphlet and say, yep, we got that covered. It's good. It's better to have a conversation, because everyone's coming at this from a different level of knowledge, and there's a big knowledge imbalance right now between us at the company and folks in the community. So it takes a while to build trust, to believe what we're saying, and that just needs to start with a conversation.
Okay, and I think that was a big aspect of what we're doing here is talking.
Sure.
Obviously, just a few days ago, the former president was shot at and pretty close to being killed or seriously injured.
It's terrifying.
And I think it's important for everyone to realize that even if we don't agree, it's okay to sit down and talk to people, because that's the only way to actually get to understanding their perspective, and and B, talking is much better than yelling. You actually can be receptive and hear. And I think it's that's why I think meeting with you today has been very, very important. Is giving us a chance to have a conversation.
Sure.
And I want to dispel another rumor that it's been all over the internet.
Okay.
Let me flip this back over. I turn the pages, but it's the one that says solar farms create tornadoes and severe weather. From what I found online, it's been shared over 200 million times on social media since roughly 2016.
Wow.
There have been numerous, legitimate organizations looking into this, because it's supposedly written by a rocket scientist, and he listed all these credentials off in the post, and no one was able to find any confirmation of his name working for NASA, all this stuff. So it's pretty well established that is not, it's not true.
Yeah.
Misinformation. It's hard to beat that as a company, right? I mean, when you're trying to talk to people, unfortunately, a lot of people read something and, hey, this guy says he's a NASA scientist, even though they don't know who wrote it.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to dispel those rumors. Is that a struggle that you are up against, trying to get the truth out when sometimes there's varying accounts of possible untruths out there that people believe?
Yeah, for sure. And part of that here is, misinformation is something we deal with a lot. And folks often are not intentionally spreading misinformation. You see something that is legitimately scary, and you want to share it to either find out if it's true or not, or just to make sure other people know about it. And I completely understand that human impulse, and it's a large reason why social media exists, to rapidly share information, even if it's not verifiable. And it's something that we spend a lot of time on, is trying to correct that, and it's extremely difficult to do, because fear can be a motivator, and like you were just saying, civil discourse has become increasingly difficult, where folks might resort to a yelling match instead of sitting down and really kind of talking through something, to see both sides, having an open mind to potentially being wrong or misunderstanding information about something. Like there's so much nuance to this technology, the project we're proposing, how the process works, that it's very easy to misunderstand. But we need to be open to hearing folks' concerns and genuinely working to address them. But everyone else needs to be ready to, be like, okay, you know what? Maybe I was wrong about that. Still, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and I think someone told me a long time ago when I was younger, they said the hardest thing for an adult to do is to say, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, human nature is what it is, and we, sometimes we get so stuck on feeling like we're right it's kind of hard to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And I want to say, for the record, I talked to you and your employee here before we recorded. I mean, you guys aren't dismissing or discounting dissenting voices. It seemed like you guys had a very respectful approach to that. And you understand there's going to be people that will never support this idea.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. I was very curious how you guys were going to touch base on that topic with me privately, because some places will, they can be disparaging towards people that don't like them or talk down about them. But I didn't get that feeling at all. And I want to say that so people are aware.
Sure.
You guys seem to really respect the fact that some people aren't going to agree with you.
Yeah, no, we know that not everyone's going to be happy about what we're doing, and end of the day, like, right, we just know that even if you're not happy about it, even if you think no matter what anyone would ever say to me about this project, that I will never support it. Okay, that's fine. We don't need you to support it. We don't need you to like it. But just having the chance to have your concerns listened to and genuinely attempted to address is all that we're usually asking for, because like I said, if this goes forward, we want it to be a project that folks, that even if you're like, I wish it didn't happen, but at least it happened this way and addressed these like XYZ concerns that I had along the way, so that you're not left feeling like, oh man, I could have made a difference. Now this thing was happening, and that's kind of where we try to land on it, because every concern is legitimate. There are no illegitimate concerns. If you're coming to us with a concern, we're going to listen to you and talk through it.
And yeah, that's very apparent in the interactions I've had with you. Property values. This is another question I get from a lot of people. From what I've researched, property values besides solar farms, they do lose value. That's what I've read. Now, the percentages vary. Some say 1% to 2%. Others say up to 10%. I think there's a lot of determining factors to that. But is there any plan to help those property owners offset any loss in value?
There's no couple things. So there's a lot of nuance to how property value studies have been done in the country regarding wind and solar. We don't see it at all settled in the direction that solar is going to reduce property values. The bulk of studies appear to show a negligible change in property value, either positive, neutral, or if it's close. And the reasons that we could see a solar project causing a negative change in property values would be if the things that you're reading online about solar were true. If a solar project is going to poison your groundwater and destroy the surrounding ecology and be right on your back step with no landscaping and be poorly constructed and bad stormwater controls, and no local benefit, yeah, that would be something that I'd expect fully to have an impact on property values. Thank God that's not what we're doing, because we would never be able to do it. If you're employing thoughtful setbacks, robust landscaping, so then a few years folks can't see it if they don't want to see it, are making sure that it's not creating noise that's bugging them when they're trying to have a barbecue, and the fact that solar is safe and everything else, that all kind of works together to address the main concerns you have about property values. Then when you factor in the benefits of tens of millions of dollars going to the schools and everything else, that all works in. One thing we are doing for neighbors, though, whether for agricultural neighbors, we're doing drain tile agreements that'll be going out soon. If folks are interested in working with us on preserving tile and preventing any crop damage out there for neighboring renters and property owners who live within a quarter mile of the project. For renters, it's folks can opt into $1,250 per year for as long as they live near the project. For a property owner, a homeowner near the project, they get $5,000 for opting in to do landscaping on their own property, and then either $20,000 for a home solar array, or go to Vegas, whatever you want to do with it, or the $1,250 a year for the life of the project. So we're trying to find ways that folks can directly benefit. And if someone wants to think about that as that's to offset some property value thing, sure, whatever you want it to be. But we know that no study is going to change someone's mind about property values. if you're like, it tends to be an emotional issue. I mean, our house means so much to us, and a lot of people, it's kind of their largest store of wealth. So we understand that there's a lot of concern attached to it, and probably nothing we say can change that if you're in one camp or the other.
Well, just let me clarify what something you just said. So bordering properties, I mean, they would get some, or a farmland that border a solar farm, that they would get some kind of financial, if they opt in. When you say when they opt in, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so we have what's called a good neighbor agreement. It's on our website. It's really us being a good neighbor to neighbors to the project. And by opting in, I mean you are signing on and giving us your tax information so we can actually pay you money. But there's no kind of restriction on you in terms of what you can say about the project, positive or negative, how you can interact with OPSB, public officials, your neighbor, your uncle, doesn't matter at all. It's simply we ask that we have the chance to address concerns folks have, but otherwise it's an opportunity for folks to get money for landscape on their property. And one thing we hear a lot is, well, it's nearby, can't I get my electric bill reduced or get solar in my house? We're like, well, we can't directly do that, but we can give you money to do that. So that $12.50 is designed to offset, about 30% of your average homeowner's electric bill for the year, or 20 grand's about enough money to put a decent sized solar array on your house to offset electric usage. So that's how we landed at those things. For a neighboring agricultural landowner, we're more focused on drainage and crop damage to make sure that they know that they're covered. They are usually covered anyway on those kind of things, but we want to make sure that we spell it out for folks just exactly what we want to do to make sure that you're comfortable with this thing going forward, even if you don't like it.
Okay, well, that's very good information to hear. And as you said just a few moments ago, people can go online to your webpage, and you said it's a good neighbor program.
Yeah, it should be pretty front and center there.
Yeah. All right, I think people should definitely check that out. I've never heard of that, so that's great.
Yeah.
I think one of the last questions I got for you here is the Harvard Business Review, The Dark Side of Solar Power. It's an article from February of 2021, so it's it's a little outdated a little bit. It's 3.5 years old. The biggest takeaway I got from reading this article was disposal issues of solar panels. It's cheaper to throw them in the landfill versus recycle. At least that's how it was in 2021 when they wrote this. Has the industry made any significant changes since then? And will you recycle your old out of commission panels, or will you just throw them in the landfill, or do you know?
You certainly can't say for sure. There's the preference to reuse, recycle panels. That's the start, and the industry certainly responded to a ton of bad press between probably 2015 and now about what could happen if nothing is done about recycling. We kind of compare it to when the first cars were made. You didn't necessarily have junkyards ready for scrap in a car, but as soon as enough cars were reaching end of life and decommissioning, folks were ready for it. And the same thing is happening now with solar panels. So I get emails every day in outreach about folks looking for damaged or decommissioned panels to either recycle or recondition and reuse. So it's happening now. First Solar up in Perrysburg recycles their own cadmium telluride panels, but there are companies popping up everywhere doing this work because they see the value in it. It's not just, okay, can we recycle it to its base components? Even a panel that that was hit by hail and might have some fracturing on it, that can still be reconditioned and reused. That's still a functional panel. It's just not one that we would keep in the field, but someone else could then use that, in a home or off-grid installation.
Okay.
So we see it as likely that this project would be in 40 years recycling panels. I don't see why it wouldn't.
The panels, this is just kind of a new question, but what's the lifespan? Let's say this is operational. I just installed that panel right behind you. How long is that going to be used?
Sure. So these panels have a production guarantee of 25 years. That's guaranteeing the level of production annually, and we would expect a solar panel to last easily 35 or 40 years, unless it's damaged during the course of operation.
Now, another question that just popped in my head, and I'm not asking you to read the future, but as we all know with technology, a few years down the road, technology grows at a very high rate, obviously. And I'm sure that in the solar industry, I mean, things are just going to continue to improve and get more efficient, smaller, lighter. Who knows how it's going to end up? And you said it's a 25-year rough life cycle. That's what they're guaranteed from production. But 15 years from now, there may be technology available that's like makes these so inefficient that it would be easier to just buy new and replace. Is that something the industry, are you guys as a company looking at that possibility as well?
We're seeing that now in the wind industry, where projects built 15 or 20 years ago, technology changed so much that industry, I think much less incrementally than it does in solar, where towers got higher, blades got bigger, turbines got more efficient, that you are seeing that repowering going on there. It's certainly possible that something could change that much in 15 or 20 years for solar, and in that case, it makes economic sense to repower it and undertake that cost. It's possible, but at that point, you'll have a fully paid for solar project. So even if it's producing less money than it would with brand new panels, it's still going to be economically competitive. Yeah.
All right, I have one other question that someone sent to me just a little bit ago, and I liked it. Now, you mentioned earlier you get the 30% tax credit for the solar. If that stops or dramatically drops, will there be enough energy production to cover the lease agreements?
Sorry, say that again?
If, let's say, next year, 10 years from now, I think this 30% is good until 2035. So let's say in 2036, the federal government says, look, we're not doing this anymore. 0%. Now, I know I'm asking you to forecast 10 years into the future, but this person was concerned, and I understood their concern. If that tax credit significantly drops, do you think there would be enough energy production from your program to continue to pay your lease agreements? Would that cause you guys to be in a financially difficult situation?
It's a good question. I see what you're saying. So the investment tax credit is a one-time thing. So if it's there at 30%, if it's there at 10%, or if it gets zeroed out, we would expect the project to be constructed in any of those scenarios. And once the project's operational, there's no ongoing tax credit for it.
Okay.
So we wouldn't. So if it went away in the future, we wouldn't be concerned about that at all.
So just to clarify, that tax credit is for the construction of.
Yes, exactly. So it happens post construction, but for confusion can arrive from wind power, where there's something called the production tax credit, and that lasts, I believe, for the first 10 years of production, where every megawatt hour produced gets something like $9 or something as a tax credit.
Okay.
For solar, it's 30% of the capitalized cost of construction.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, I appreciate the information. Yeah. I got one more question,
no,
Doug. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I was just sitting there staring at your panels here for the last hour, and I'm not a scientific guy. How the hell do these things work?
They work through something called the photoelectric effect, where some brilliant guy over 100 years ago figured out that polysilicon crystals can convert sunlight to an electric charge. So this is an advancement of that. When you take a look at those panels, you'll see that most of the panel is just glass, tempered glass, and a capsulant to make it rigid. But within there, you can see these etched silicon wafers, and those are what convert the sun's photons, the sun's energy, into electricity by moving electrons across a barrier between two oppositely charged things. So then those electrons get routed through a conductive material, typically like silver or copper or something like that, and then moves through the panel, out through the wires, and gets all collected. And not being a physicist, that's the best I can do for you right now.
That's a lot more than I could have done.
But no, I truly think of solar as a miracle. It's a crazy thing to think about when you're just like, wait, these are just sitting there. Right. There's no moving parts apart from a motor that turns the array. Like it's like plants growing. It's the same thing.
It's just capturing the sunlight.
Same idea.
Yeah, I mean it is quite impressive technology. Again, Doug, I appreciate the time.
Yeah.
And
no, thank you so much for your time.
No problem. You take care.